Everyone, welcome to our final module for this online class. I'm so happy you all made it through the course with me. I think you guys have done excellent so far, and I think you're going to really finish out strong this week. So this week, for this module, we're going to talk about ethics in business research. That's chapter 4 in our textbook. So what do we mean when we start talking about ethics? So when we're talking about ethics in research, we're talking about our morality. We need to be a moral and essentially good, upstanding person when it comes to research. When we're discussing ethics, it's not a suggestion that we have to have great moral advocates or that we need to be a great moral advocate. It's more so that we need to anticipate what may come in the future so that way we can protect our research and our research participants. In other words, we need to be morally ambiguous persons. We need to be essentially morally good in order to protect our study group. So when we're conducting research, there are 4 key principles to keep in mind and to consider. So the first is non-maleficence. So you need to do no harm. So you, as a researcher, need to ensure that you are doing no harm to anybody. The second is beneficence, which is try to do good. So with your research, you should try and do something good, whether that is a big leap in achievement in maybe medical research, or maybe it's just something good you're adding to your industry that you work in. So for me, mine was about research related to how flexible working arrangements could benefit small nonprofit organizations. So I tried to do good by showing nonprofit organizations that they could pay less money, as they typically do, yet still have employees want to work for them if they're able to work from home. The next is autonomy, which is freedom of action. So we need to make sure that our participants have autonomy, that they're able to participate and able to leave the research as they want. And finally is justice, which is essentially fairness. We need to be fair in how we're conducting our research, who's involved, and what goes into that. And all these principles are meaningful when we set out to do research. Like we just said, we try to do good through our research, try to prevent harm, we try to find a benefit in what we're doing, and allow participants to have autonomy and do what they want, and be able to exit the research if they ever felt uncomfortable. So there's some ethical issues that could arise in the research process. So first off is access. So this could be physical, cognitive access, continuing access. So don't cut corners in your research, and don't fall temptation to just cut corners and make things easier, as this could lead to harm of participants in some cases. We need to think of the access that people have to your research. Now there's participant acceptance, trying to gain the trust of participants so they will open up to you while staying within ethical boundaries. So, you're trying to build, as we saw a couple lectures ago, we're trying to build relationships with our participants in our research, but there's a certain line. You can't cross a certain line. We still need to be morally good and not take advantage of anyone, however that you may think of that in your mind. We need to gain their trust while staying within our ethical boundaries. Another thing is time, understanding that people will take some time to respond. Don't follow up too aggressively. So if you're asking someone a question, give them some time to respond. It's not immediate that people can just spit out an answer. Sometimes they have to think. Another is taking the easy way out. It can be tempting to take the easy route, but you owe it to yourself and the participants to be doing the correct things by the books. In other words, just don't take the easy way out. It may seem great. It'll be like, oh wow, I could save a couple days worth of typing if I just forget a couple portions of the transcription process. However, that's not fair to your research, and it's not fair to the people that took the time to be a part of your research. And finally is data recording. For this slide, informing the participants that there is a recording process and ensuring that they consent to this. So it's really important to ensure that people are consenting to whatever you're doing. Now, we saw in a couple lectures ago that there is some credence to not informing them all the way that they're being recorded. And those types of research have their place, but generally speaking, for anything that if we were able to actually conduct research, which again, reminder, we're not actually conducting research, it would be important to let them know that they're being recorded in the interview process. So you also need to consider your role in the data. So take a look at what your role is. This will help you take an objective look at your results and the data that you find, and as such, you'll have much more reliable and accurate data. In other words, don't cheat on your analysis, and that's going to ensure that you're not misinterpreting data, that you're ensuring you're following proper analysis protocols, things like that. And what that plays into eventually is confidentiality. And as you interview people and bring them into your research, you need to keep their confidentiality as best as you can to whatever degree that you're able to. So you need to ensure that all the information is being kept confidential. You're not leaking names, information, age, gender, religious beliefs, anything like that, because that is considered unethical. So how do we protect us and our participants? So we're trying to cover our butts, and we're also trying to ensure that we're doing right by our participants. So typically a researcher at a college level, at Lackawanna College, at Marywood University, at the University of Scranton, Harvard, Yale, anything like that, typically that researcher would have to go through an institutional review board, also abbreviated IRB board. There's also another one called the Exempt Review Committee. They both have their place. The IRB is one that you'll probably hear more often. And there are some guidelines that need to be followed by an IRB. So they set rules and boundaries for your institution. If you want to do research through whatever university you work for, whatever college you work for, there's guidelines you got to adhere to. And there's lots of forms that go along with that you need to complete to ensure that you're being protected and that you're protecting others. And it just helps us establish rules and help us gain information in an ethical manner. So, a couple pointers for staying ethical throughout your research. So, be honest and do not deceive your participants with the purpose of your study. Again, we saw in our previous lecture that there is some credence to doing this. However, for anything that we would be doing based on your proposals, and I'm using air quotes, proposals, you want to be upfront about what the purpose of your study is. It's going to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So you're also going to fully disclose the purpose and intentions that you have in regards to the utilization of the collected data. In other words, you're going to tell your participants why you're collecting this data, what the benefit is, and what you're going to utilize it for. You also should follow your institution's ethical codes. So we saw on the last slide with the IRB, there are a lot of institutional regulations that we need to follow as researchers. Again, that's at the academic level. In the business world, so working as a normal employee at a company somewhere, they're going to have their own ethical codes. Typically, they're not tailored specifically to research, but there are some things out there that you'll have to adhere to. So again, don't cause harm, not just physical, but you don't want to embarrass anybody. You don't want to stress out a participant. You don't want to put them in discomfort or in pain in any way, shape, or form. You want to make sure that you're not harming someone, whether it be physically, mentally, or emotionally. And be sure to gain proper consent, unless this would invalidate the study. So make sure that anyone being recorded is consenting. Why is that? Well, for one, it's ethical to ensure that your participants are on the same page and understand why they're a part of this research. On top of that, it covers you, because if they ever try to raise a problem that they were uninformed, getting a paper that they signed and dated that said that they wanted to be a part of this research is going to cover you as the researcher as well. So you're going to respect the participant's right to refuse. If your participant wants to stop at any time and leave, they have the right to do that, and you need to respect that. You need to also respect the participant's anonymity and confidentiality. Again, keeping their information confidential. You need to clarify to the participants and any gatekeepers of the potential limits of confidentiality. So there are some limits to confidentiality. You need to be upfront about that. So there is going to be some identifying information in your research paper, but there's so many limits. There's limits as to what that means. So you also need to maintain objectivity during data collection, analysis, and throughout the reporting stages. You want to offer an audit trail for data collection and analysis, and you're going to protect all data to the best of your abilities. If you don't protect that data, lawsuits could happen, and that's something we want to make sure that we avoid. So there's some strategies to ensure ethical issues in business research are addressed appropriately. So first, you want to take a look at stakeholder analysis. When considering ethical implications of business research, it is important to start by identifying who the stakeholders of your proposed study are. May include research participants, but also include people like managers and other team members. Managers and other team members in this instance are called the gatekeepers because they are your entry into the workplace. You need to go through them if you want to do research at, say, Microsoft. You can't just walk up to the Microsoft building, walk in and start interviewing people. You need to be on board with management there. You need to talk to probably multiple levels of managers, explain why you're doing this research and get approval. Otherwise, they're probably going to call security on you if you go to interview somebody at their work premise without approval. Identifying these stakeholders will also allow you to learn more about the company in question, which will help you to align with their internal policies. You're going to go through risk analysis. So once you know who might be affected by your research study, you could design a risk analysis. And for each stakeholder, identify the type of risk your research imposes on them, the level of impact, such as low, medium, high, and the likelihood that it'll happen. So you're going to go through what the risks are and essentially thoroughly explain what those risks could be, what they could look like, how they could affect the participant, and to what degree they could affect the participant. And keeping the individual's information secure and secret is important when attempting to minimize the risk impact. So keeping things confidential is the best and number one way you can protect people. You also want to get that informed consent. I mentioned it before. Once you know who your population is and where you're going to find the participants, and you're ready to get rolling, you need to get consent. Informed consent is the action of a participant giving their consent to be part of the research you are conducting while informing them of their participation. So essentially, it's just informing someone of what you're doing and getting their permission. It allows a participant to be thoroughly informed of the research and allows them to protect themselves if they wish to exit the study, or if they want to exit the study. They need to be aware of the study in order to exit the study. So here's a sample list of points you could use to produce a clear information sheet for participants. So this is not something you're doing. This is something you would do if you were out there trying to get informed consent and explain to somebody what's going on. So you would have a sheet of paper that would have the title of your study, the introduction and what the purpose of the study is. So something brief, maybe one paragraph. Invitation to take part, so explaining and inviting someone to be a part of the research. Explain why they've been invited to participate. Answer the question, do they have to take part in the research? And you may think, well, what does that mean? Of course they don't. They may not know this. If you go through those stakeholders and you go through a manager who then sends this information out to employees at a large organization, they're going to think that their boss wants them to be a part of the research, and they're going to think, oh, is my job at risk if I don't participate in this research? And you need to be clear that they don't need to participate in their research to maintain their status at their job and maintain their employment at their job. Explain what will happen to me if I take part. Will I be paid for taking part? What are the potential risks of taking part? What are the benefits of taking part? Will my taking part be kept confidential? What will happen if I don't want to carry on with the study? So again, explaining all these and essentially answering these questions in some document. You don't want to make it too long because, if it's 6 pages long, they're not going to read through it all. So you got to be short and sweet, but thorough at the same time. Continuing on, what will happen to the results of the project? Who's organizing and funding the research? Contact details, so that's your contact information. What if I have questions, and who has reviewed the study? So, putting all that information together is going to help them. So, saying something like, I have read and understand the informed sheet for the above study and have the opportunity to consider the information, ask request. This is something that they would be consenting to. So this is a sample consent form. So they would maybe initial here or sign at some point. The researcher has explained to my satisfaction the purpose, principles, and procedures of the study and any possible risks involved. I'm aware that I will be required to, take part in an interview, fill out a survey, whatever you want to put there. I understand that my participation is voluntary and that I am free to withdraw from the study at any time without giving a reason and without incurring consequences from doing so. I understand how the data collection will be used and that any confidential information will normally be only seen by the researchers and will not be revealed to anyone else, and I agree to take part in the above study. So again, this would be their signature and date at this point.